United States of America really they halted their diplomatic relationship with Somalia when the civil war started in 91. Really, this is a move forward. Many Somali people, analysts, believe this is just a new relation, which is indicate that Somalia has recovered and Somalia now on the right track.
And Mr. Mohammed, how important is Somalia to the US and vice versa?
Many Somali people, analysts, back in a new relation, the development, which is 1960. And after that time, the Somali and American relations really has ups and downs. And from 2013, when the United States recognized Somalia again, then we see the relationship between the United States of America and Somalia gradually coming back. And 15 U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry, visited Mogadishu and confirmed that the United States is ready to reestablish this diplomatic process in Somalia. And this is really, both Somalia and America, this new dawn is really very important one, both United States of America and Somali government, because Somali government now trying to establish this international stage. So this is very important at this time. As you know, Somalia, there is Al-Shabaab, and America working with Somali government since 2007, when the United States started Somalia to support strikes against Al-Shabaab. So this is very important, this crucial time, and Somalia want to implement this federalism. Also, Somalia want to engage with the Horn of Africa, just like Ethiopia and Eritrea. This really move come at the right time, as Somalis believe now.
You describe it as a new dawn. Well, the US has been present in Somalia fighting against Al-Shabaab. Doesn't this move make the embassy and its surroundings an easy target?
Yeah, that is really possible. But the American facility opened very heavily guarded international security zone at Mogadishu International Airport. So maybe they target because we know that Shabab targeted that area several times before. And also encouraged the United States to make a further strike against Al-Shabaab. As you know, only this year, America conducted 20 strikes against Al-Shabaab, and they said we killed a number of Al-Shabaab fighters. So maybe.
And finally, what are some of the remaining challenges when it comes to Somalia moving forward? What can be done?
Somalia is still challenging, still getting a lot of challenge in terms of political, in terms of security. So even America still, they consider Somalia as an unstable country because of Somalia has the list so-called level 4, which means American citizens, they can't travel to Somalia. So Somalia is still facing a lot of challenge politically and security. And then that which need is to develop both United States. So Somali people believe America, they use it to, they have a good ally to Somalia. They striking Al-Shabaab, they are supporting Somali government militarily and financially. So the people of Somalia now want to see Americans supporting Somalia politically, and that is very important. So there is many questions surrounding the American-Somali relations. Is American a good partner Somalia now? Can Americans be a trusted friend to Somalia now? So there is a lot of questions that Somali people asking the relationship between the America and Somalia now. But they see really they are very optimistic and see this is a very good positive move forward to the right time on the right track. But still, there is a lot of challenge. There is a lot of questions to be answered.
Okay, well, on that positive note, despite the challenges, thank you very much for your analysis. That was political analyst Ahmed Weli Hussein Mohammed there. Moving on to other news now, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged delegates from BRICS countries to find ways of building inclusive growth, multilateralism and unity. The meeting is currently taking place in South Africa and is being attended by more than 200 delegates from political parties of BRICS member states. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
This political parties dialogue takes place under the theme towards building a common agenda, inclusive development and multilateralism in the fourth industrial revolution.
The discussions and conversations here will explore common approaches to dealing with economic and political challenges as well as potential threats to the BRICS member states. The ruling and former ruling parties from Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa want to play a more vigorous role in pushing for the governments of their countries to implement policies that would have a significant impact on the lives of their people.
Gathered here are leaders of political parties. We proceed from the understanding that these political parties that are gathered here in Pretoria are merely organizational expressions of the hopes and the dreams and aspirations of billions of people who, at one point or another, bestowed on them the honor to constitute and lead their governments.
Political parties are the makers of domestic and foreign policies, champions of public opinion, and an important driving force for human civilizations. We, the political parties, share important responsibilities in providing leadership of our times, seizing opportunities, eradicate global peace deficit, development deficit, and governance deficit.
South Africa's governing party, the African National Congress, is the host of this dialogue. The party says this gathering forms part of promoting, advancing, and strengthening multilateralism.
As we grapple with the challenges facing our respective countries and the world as a whole, we have a responsibility as leading political parties to forge unity amongst ourselves and act in concert to make the world a better place for all to live in. This unity that we are seeking to forge implies, among other things, that we must, at a political level, do two things. Firstly, agree on a common frame of reference from which we conduct a proper analysis of the world that we live in. And secondly, actively work to change it for the better.
Our world today is undergoing a new round of major development, transformation, and adjustment. As the tide of globalization surge forward, protectionism, unilateralism have also cast a shadow over the world economy. While new technological revolution and industrial transformation are in the pipeline, the transition from the old to the new driving force has not completed. The alignment of forces is undergoing profound transformation, but there has not been a fundamental break of imbalance of development. Despite the acceleration of change in global governance, backward governance remains a protruding challenge.
The discussions will continue until Thursday. It's expected that the dialogue will reach an agreement summarized in a Johannesburg declaration.
Still in South Africa, today marks the 5th anniversary of the death of Nelson Mandela. Mandela was 95 when he died on the 5th of December 2013. He was South Africa's first democratic president and one of the most iconic leaders in the world. Today, he remains admired across the globe, especially for his leadership qualities. Sumitra Naidu reports.
Nelson Mandela was no saint, but he was a good leader. Many international politicians still aspire to be as great. Madiba's granddaughter is trying to keep his memory alive. She reflected on her grandfather's leadership qualities and the lessons that remain relevant today.
It doesn't matter what your circumstances are, you are informed by the village, by the community that you grow up in. And also look towards Granddad, because his leadership quality was was harnessed when he was young. Leadership starts at an early age, and it's all about choices. He made a choice first to be a lawyer. And when he could have been a lawyer that's earning a big salary, he chose to be an activist, to fight for his people, to die for his people. He is then offered freedom when he is incarcerated in Robben Island. 3 times when he was in Robben Island, he chooses not to take it because it's not liberating his people, it's just him.
The Tembekile Mandela Foundation, named in honor of Madiba's oldest son, has teamed up with the United Nations Development Programme to launch a new leadership program. Leading Like Mandela is aimed at grooming young African leaders.
We recognize that it requires a certain kind of leadership to be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And this program is an attempt to create across societies those kinds of leaders that will be able to embrace the values that Tata Madiba himself embraced and take this forward in societies.
5 years on, Mandela is still being honored for his contribution to the fight for freedom in South Africa. But the hope is that young leaders will attempt to emulate the great man and display servant leadership to ensure sustainable growth and development and to uplift the most vulnerable. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
To Nigeria now, where proceedings at Parliament in the capital Abuja have been disrupted as a result of a protest by staff members over welfare conditions. CGTN's Philahaza reports.
Hundreds of angry legislative staff members prevented lawmakers from gaining access into the chambers of the National Assembly, claiming their entitlements have been withheld for almost a decade. The Parliamentary Staff Association of Nigeria staged a protest, saying some of its members are being owed allowances or denied promotion since 2010. The chairman of the association stated that after long periods of deliberation with the management of the legislature, they had to resort to what he termed a warning strike, insisting that it would extend if their concerns were not addressed quickly.
We'll give it 2 weeks ultimatum. If nothing is done, we are going to shut the National Assembly indefinitely. And nobody will gain access to this until that issue is addressed.
Meanwhile, a statement by the clerk of the National Assembly, Sani Omolori, on behalf of the management, refuted the claims of the workers, maintaining the issues raised were being addressed and undergoing due process. Mr. Omolori says several attempts to prevent a face-off between the management of the legislature and the workers have not been successful. As Nigerians head to the polls in February 2019, various labor unions are looking to draw the attention of the government towards the welfare of their members. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari, who is seeking for a second term in office, is yet to assent to an upward review of the national minimum wage. Philahaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
To the latest on Brexit now. British lawmakers have delivered a huge legal blow to Prime Minister Theresa May. They found her government in contempt over its refusal to publish key legal advice on the split from the EU. That historic vote came during a huge and long debate on Brexit in Parliament. CGTN's Richard Bestick is in London with more on the drama.
It's been just one day, but the Brexit agreement deal has already triggered huge parliamentary drama. There are 5 days of debate to go, but MPs in an unprecedented vote have already found the government guilty of contempt of Parliament for refusing to make public the legal advice it's been given. The contrite government has now promised to release the details, but it's a measure of two things. One, that Parliament not giving the government an inch in a highly challenging political landscape, and that the level of the trust between the two couldn't be more threadbare. Prime Minister Theresa May has again been pressing reluctant MPs to accept the deal of the terms of Britain's withdrawal from the European Union.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion on the order paper in my name and those of my right honourable friends. At the start of 5 days of debate that will set the course our country takes for decades to come, it is worth taking a moment to reflect on how we got here.
Consistently, opinion polls have shown the British public split down the middle on just about every aspect of Brexit. Trouble is, so is Parliament. A people and a Parliament united by a mutual mistrust of the deal negotiated by the Prime Minister with the EU. May now has only a matter of days to save her deal, but it's got to be said, It'll be a difficult uphill struggle, and barring a political earthquake, most people anticipate she will lose the vote. And Britain will be thrown into an unprecedented political and diplomatic crisis, which could bring down the Prime Minister, her government, and even trigger a second Brexit referendum. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Recapping your headlines at this hour, Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Portugal for the fourth stop on his world tour. He says bilateral relations transcend time and distance, and that China's partnership with Portugal is looking to the future. President Xi has met with his counterpart, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, reviewed the honour guard and attended a banquet. He's in the country for 2 days. Protests rooted in ethnic violence have continued for a third day in parts of Ethiopia's Oromia region. People have taken to the streets in Bureyu, near to Addis Ababa, as well as in the west of the country. The government says it's doing its best to protect citizens and to avoid further destruction of property. Authorities have arrested at least 200 people so far. The United States has renewed its permanent diplomatic mission in Somalia. This comes nearly 30 years after the US embassy was closed in the Horn of Africa country. In a statement, the US State Department says this historic event reflects Somalia's progress in recent years and is another step forward in formalizing US diplomatic engagement in Mogadishu. And today marks the 5th anniversary of the death of Nelson Mandela. Mandela was 95 when he died on the 5th of December 2013. He was South Africa's first democratic president and one of the most iconic leaders in the world. Today he remains admired across the globe, especially for his leadership qualities. And those were your headlines. Well, we are going to a short break now. We've got all the business news when we come back, including Zimbabwe's largest milling firm, National Foods, to close down as currency shortages bite. And South Africa may be out of recession, but it's not out of the woods just yet.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
China has announced that trade talks between Beijing and Washington will push forward in the next 90 days. It's confident that an agreement can be implemented. In a brief statement, China's Ministry of Commerce said it would work on implementing specific issues agreed upon as quickly as possible. President Xi Jinping and his US counterpart, Donald Trump, held a meeting last week on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Buenos Aires in Argentina. The two agreed to continue trade talks and put a halt on imposing the imposition of new tariffs. To Zimbabwe now, and one of the country's leading millers, National Foods, could become the biggest casualty of a US dollar shortage. The company intends to shut down its factories in Harare and Bulawayo due to the lack of foreign currency. CGTN's Farai Wakatuya now reports.
By the close of business today, the mills inside that factory may shut down and the people operating them be out of work until the foreign currency crisis afflicting this country improves. And that may take a long time. National Foods says it hasn't received enough foreign currency to pay off international wheat suppliers who've now cut off its credit. The central bank, which allocates scarce foreign currency, prioritizes fuel and energy imports, leaving other sectors unable to procure raw materials or falling behind on payments, a situation that's now caught up with National Foods. The shutdown, should it go ahead, will worsen erratic supplies of bread and other confectionery items and dent the country's reindustrialization plans. The umbrella body for grain millers had previously warned that its members face ruin unless payments for wheat imports improves. Zimbabwe grows less than half of its wheat requirements and spends about $45 million per quarter on international supplies. Farai Wakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
South Africa has officially moved out of recession after reporting a 2.2% GDP growth for the third quarter of the year. The country slipped into recession after a revised 0.4% contraction in the second quarter. CGTN Sumitra Naidu has this report.
The South African economy grew by 2.2% between July and September. Agriculture rebounded from its dismal performance in the second quarter, adding 6.5% to the overall GDP. Apart from the rebound in the agricultural sector, the 7.5% increase in manufacturing was encouraging, more especially because this sector accounts for thousands of jobs.
We saw a nice recovery in manufacturing off a low base. We saw good growth in your sort of domestic trade, accommodation and catering sector. We saw strong growth in finance, real estate and business services. But the big driver there really was that turnaround in manufacturing.
Mining, another sector responsible for thousands of jobs, was the big drag in these numbers, falling 8.8% in the third quarter.
It's the uncertainty that we have with the land expropriation, but also it is because of the global commodity prices that were negative, the mining sector. However, if you look at the resources also were up, and this is a reflection of the rand weakness that we have seen. But it's not necessarily because of the improvement within the underlying production within the mining sector.
Mining is likely to suffer further losses as the rand firms up and commodity prices lose steam. And while retailers are also bracing themselves for tough times, they may just enjoy a better fourth quarter. Black Friday, it seems, kicked off the official shopping season with a massive increase in consumer foot count at the country's big shopping malls. It was surprising considering that rising costs of utilities, fuel and the 1% VAT hike on goods and services.
We know they're spending again, and I believe they'll probably continue to spend. But will it be the sort of spending that will take your GDP growth rate to 2%, or will it keep it at around 1.6, 1.5%? That's the big question. And in our view, it's probably still going to be moderate stuff.
The rebound provides some relief, but economists are still expecting weak growth below 1% for 2018.
For the year as a whole, it's still not an overly optimistic picture. Growth is still going to print somewhere between 0.5 and 0.8% for the year. But moving on into next year, we'd expect better growth north of 1.5%.
South Africa has never spent long periods in recession, but it's also been a long time since it recorded a decent growth number. The rebound will keep the rating agencies happy, but that may be short-lived as this economy is skidding on thin ice. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's move on to Gambia now. The country's tourism sector is experiencing a reawakening. Thousands of European tourists are flocking to the coast of Africa as the nation intensifies its efforts to secure new markets.
December is peak season for tourists in the Gambia. Most of them head to beach resorts in Banjul, the country's capital. This offers a welcome break from the winter chill at home.
I choose Gambia because it's a short flight from England. It's one of the hottest places to come this time of year, and it's with a short flight.
We used to go to. We've heard from many people who come to Gambia that they like it here, that they come here every year. So that's what we want to experience now ourselves.
By the end of its 2017-2018 season, the country hopes its combined attractions of sun and sand, coupled with the local cultural sites, will have drawn in over 200,000 tourists, its highest number ever in a season. But it hasn't always been this way. In the last 2 years, the country's tourism sector has suffered a slump. An Ebola outbreak in the neighboring countries and a political standoff as the country's former president tried to cling to power both had a jarring effect on the sector. Tour companies advised tourists to stay away. But with a new president in place, things are changing.
The friendly weather and scenic beaches are certainly attractions that draw in tourists to the Gambia. But the tourists say they now have another reason to choose this destination. The political stability means they feel safe here.
The sector is now coming back to life. Most of the 45 main tourist hotels in Banjul are full. The tourism sector is estimated to contribute to about 20% of the Gambia's GDP. In order to increase its earnings, the government is now looking for new markets.
We have realized the potentials of Chinese tourists to the Gambia. Because we've been to China twice in 2018 and my minister has gone there. And we know for sure and for fact that the Chinese outbound market is huge, particularly for destination Africa, where the Gambia has a good market share. What we want to do is to concentrate and intensify a good marketing and promotional approach in China.
With sustained efforts, the government hopes in time to turn Africa's smallest country on land into a powerful player in the global tourism circuit. Wilkison Yabo, CGTN, the Gambia.
After the break, why lovers of grasshoppers in Uganda are not celebrating this season.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Egypt celebrated the 116th anniversary of Cairo Museum that hosts thousands of ancient Egyptian artifacts and monuments. This event coincides with the near completion of the Grand Museum, a new, larger, high-end museum located next to the Giza pyramids. And it's casting a shadow over the future of the original antiquities home in Cairo. Yasser Hakim with the details.
Tourism is a major source of revenue for Egypt.
And Cairo Museum is one of the main tourist attractions in the country. It receives millions of visitors every year.
The museum was inaugurated on the 15th of November 1902. It was built by a French architect with classical design. It has 170,000 ancient artifacts displayed over 2 floors. The heavy monuments such as big statues, coffins and gates are in the ground floor.
The anniversary of Cairo Museum is celebrated annually, but this year it's different. Question marks have risen over the fate of this building when the new Grand Museum is opened in 2019 at the Giza Plateau. But the Minister of Antiquities, Khaled Anani, has put an end to any speculations.
We are sending a clear message this evening that the Cairo Museum will not die. We redisplayed 214 objects that impressed everybody today. We'll be continuing the revival of this museum to be in the best standards all over the world.
Anani also revealed future plans laid out for this iconic building in the heart of Cairo.
The museum needs an upheaval in its infrastructure and how artifacts are displayed. Basic services for visitors, ventilation systems and other areas also need to be improved. We received a grant from the EU to overhaul the museum in cooperation with UNESCO. It's a 7-year project to remodel the museum according to international and UNESCO standards.
Thousands of artifacts have now been moved to the new Grand Museum, leaving room for renovations here. Cairo Museum doors have been open for the last 116 years, showcasing ancient Egypt's treasures to the world. And with the latest government assurances, it will now remain open to receive millions of tourists for decades to come. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
In Uganda, grasshoppers are considered a delicacy, and at this time of the year the insects can be the hottest selling item in markets. But this year the snack is turning out to be a rare commodity, as Leon Esenyange now reports.
Another day out looking for a good harvest. Abdul Sawankambo has been in the grasshopper business for 5 years now. Today he has not found any.
It has been about a week and a half since we caught any grasshoppers.
Like Abdu, many grasshopper traders have little or nothing to sell. The harvests here have not been good. Any that make it to the capital have come from far. It has been a tough season this year, and at this market, traders have to wait for hours for the grasshoppers to arrive. And when they do, it is a scramble to get their hands on something to sell. And it's the big sacks that are auctioned off first. But they are expensive, costing around $100, $20 more than usual.
We cannot make much of that. Even those that fry them can't make much.
With little available, John Baptist Mwonge has turned to selling old stock. But business is slow. He has had to pass the increased costs on to his customers.
I have sold these grasshoppers for 2 days. I used to sell them in just hours. The grasshoppers are really expensive now because they are few.
The traders blame the scarcity of the insects on changes they have seen in the environment.
The grasshoppers were originally from central Uganda, but when people there started cutting the trees to farm, the grasshoppers started to slowly disappear. Now we get them from Kisunga in the west. That's where the forests are.
But not all hope is lost. The grasshopper season lasts until January. Many hope they will see the insects in numbers before the season is out. Leon Esenyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Delicious. We're going to a news break now. Marathon King Eliud Kipchoge crowned IAAF Male Athlete of the Year.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.